Hello and welcome to DigFin VOX, Voices in Digital Finance. I'm your host, Jame DiBiasio. If you enjoy the program, give us a like, share, subscribe, get that algorithm going. My guest today is Emmanuel Daniel, founder of trade publication The Asian Banker and author of a new book called The Great Transition, The Personalization of Finance is Here. I spoke with Emmanuel about what this great transition means for banks and incumbents, for fintechs, and for individuals. Emmanuel Daniel, welcome to DigFin VOX.
Jamie, great to be on your show, and congratulations for what you've built over time. So, looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I mean, the congratulations, I think, should go the other way today. You are the founder of the long-standing publication, The Asian Banker. I've been to some of your events. You often present, very expansive attempts, talks and visionary speeches about where you see finance and technology. So you finally encapsulated a lot of your thinking into a book, which I read and I reviewed on DigFin, called The Great Transition, The Personalization of Finance is Here.
Yeah.
There you go. So anyone who writes about technology in finance, I think personalization is a term that gets thrown around a lot. You're trying to do something a little more with it, I think. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, or let me just rephrase, in your preface, you say finance will become the operating system of the personalization of society as a whole. What does that mean?
Jamie, thanks for having read the book, because it is both at once an easy book to read, because it sort of tries to encapsulate profound changes taking place in society today in a way that everyone can understand. In fact, the book cover has a block of ice on it, and I use that as an allegory or a description of what's going to be happening or what is already happening in society today. The information era is empowering the individual on many layers and many levels. At the basic level, we are all being imbibed with a lot more knowledge than we know how to handle. And, it creates a lot of dystopian forces in society and so on. At the technology level, even the world that we've become accustomed to, the platform world, is, in my view, starting to disintegrate into personalization. The individual is gaining greater control over his own data and who and how he wants to interact with using that data. That data itself is capturing not just information, but asset value that can be transmitted. And so when we add it all up together, society as a whole is on a march in a certain direction, which is that with tokens, with the disintegration of platforms, society itself is adding so much power to the individual. When you think about, and after I'd written my book, ChatGPT comes out, GPT-4 comes out, and what does it do? It takes away the tediousness of gathering information and then empowers the individual to be able to do more with it. So the emphasis moves from the ability to collect information or even to remember them or to store them to the ability to use them. And that's the kind of empowerment that the individual is undergoing. Now, I'm saying all this by going back to the first principles of what finance is, and then reconstructing, where we are heading from those first principles. Right. And what the first principle of finance.
Let me just I just want to clarify, just so I make sure I'm with you on this, Emmanuel. So that when you talk about personalization, what you're really referring to is this empowerment of the individuals through technology and control of data. Is that kind of the way you're framing it?
simplistic way, yes, that's what it is. Yeah, in a simplistic way, let's start with that as the definition, and then there's a lot to drill down into.
Yeah.
Oh,
So then, yeah, and then you're talking about, you know, the roles of finance in society. Obviously, there's classic social needs for finance, why we have it. So provide people with a place to put their money, a store of value, risk management, payments, and of course credit. So what does personalization imply for whether it's fintechs or banks or other institutions in terms of how they deliver those services and how we consume them?
so in the initial iteration of the fintech phenomenon, if you want to call it that, was that that fintech was going to redefine the intermediation business. Personalization implies that we don't need intermediation. That you and I can transact with each other directly. So technology and the entire industry is on a journey. So today, when I say the phrase personalization to someone who works in a bank or an exchange, he'll say, "Oh, we need to provide the platform on which the individual can come and transact." And so he wants to be an intermediary. He wants to centralize the transaction. That's the terminology that's used even by the crypto people. And he wants to monetize it. He wants to be able to generate revenue from that. But as tokens and as platforms disintegrate and tokens become more important, we now need to start thinking about an ecosystem where individuals can transact with each other. And then what do the intermediaries do? So that's the journey we are on. And that's what I mean by the great transition. We're in a transitionary phase. The incumbents are still there. And the energies and the mechanics of the new platforms are under construction. So if you take something like peer-to-peer lending, for example, the first iteration of peer-to-peer lending was built on the idea of a platform. The platforms couldn't think of themselves as selling anything other than what the traditional banks were selling. So if it was platform for peer-to-peer lending for mortgages, the platform said, we are selling mortgages. But if you have thousands of potential borrowers and thousands of potential lenders with assets to be deployed and liquidity to be put into the network, new products can come about and new types of relationships in terms of what a mortgage is. Today, a mortgage is a plain old vanilla, boring 10 to 30 year asset that you are locked into for a long time. But in the future, because we know so much more about each other, a mortgage can be a long-term lease. A mortgage can be slivered off into different chunks, and for 5 years it's a lease. For another 3 years it's a timeshare, and another 5 years it's an asset. It's like a higher purchase type of an arrangement. All of that. Now, all of this becomes possible as the intermediaries gather lots of data about both sides of a transaction. But that data is increasingly becoming available even to the end user. So when we think about ride sharing, for example, what is ride sharing? There is symmetry of information between the supplier and the user, and even the regulator and other parties in the transaction. So finance is coming to that dimension where both the supply side, the institutions, and the demand side, the end user, has the same information. We see this in markets today, that because of the amount of information that's on Reddit, for example, that retail customers can respond to market trends with the same force as an institutional investor in the old days. So it's a transition. Where is transition taking us? There are many different forces, trying to influence the process.
Yeah, but let me go back to your idea about, let's take a mortgage, and using data and digital technology to take, instead of having a 10 or a 30-year fixed or floating rate note, you would turn that, with a house as the collateral there, you would imagine that the structure of that could be changed depending on where you sit in the life cycle of that loan. People could use it for different purposes at different times with different counterparties.
Yep.
How do you square that then with, I guess, the fact that up until now, we think of financial products as essentially legal contracts? They're set down in writing from day one, and then they don't really change unless you're talking about something that's built to change in the beginning, like a convertible bond. So, what has to happen, whether it's from a legal point of view or a point of view of creating, some of the safeguards as well, so people don't get scammed or make stupid mistakes with something as important as a mortgage. Do you have any sense of what has to happen for there to be a safe transition to a more dynamic use of tools?
So I say in my book, anything that can be digitized can be turned into data, and anything that can be turned into data can be financialized. Mm-hmm. So basically, in today's world, the intermediaries have a control over the transaction because they hold the data, and they hold it almost in a physical form, paper and stuff like that. Now, when a lot more of the data is captured in digital form, it takes a life of its own. There are entire businesses, GE no less. Jeff Immelt said in 2014, he said that in the future, GE will not be a manufacturing company. It's going to be a data trading company. And so anything about ourselves that can be digitized and put out there can be traded, can be exchanged, can be financialized, and then it takes a life of its own. So that's the operating principle, that data being able to digitize is the starting point of being able to create all of these new asset classes. Yeah. All of society is going through a journey also in trying to understand that if you can digitize a lot of information, what information has an inherent fiscal value, a monetary value that can be traded. We are on a learning curve there. Elon Musk says that the Tesla vehicle is basically a repository for data. Any amount of data in there can be turned into a financialized assets. Usage, insurance, all kinds of other different uses. But not everything can be financialized. And so we're going to go into a journey where we're going to try and financialize everything, but over time we will understand that there are some data that can be financialized. Now, why do I say all this? Because I think that the catch-all phrase right now is that data is the new gold or something like that. In my book, I say that data is the new vegetable, and the nature of vegetable is that if you have too old vegetable, it's useless. If you have too young, you don't have enough. If you have too much, it loses its value. If you have too little, you can't make it into a product. So data is very it's not fungible, but it's got a lifespan element to it, and a dynamic tone. So we are putting in place all the structure for that right now.
I want to leap into sort of the depth of the book. There's one or two passages that I found really interesting, and sort of leap ahead in some of the things we've talked about. We talked about mortgages, and we talked about the way that these issues around data, and you had towards the end of the book, you said something like, I quote, the bank deposit account is the Kodak equivalent of financial services industry today. This is the one product that banks can't imagine giving up ever. Now, bank deposits have been in the news in the past several weeks with everything going on in the United States, with bank depositors leaving Silicon Valley Bank and others. and concerns and a huge, because of interest rate changes, a huge rush out of deposits and into money market funds. But bank deposits are also really the core building block of the whole financial system that we have today, right? I mean, the whole idea of fractional reserve banking is predicated on the fact that banks have deposits so that they can make credit available using those, and the maturity transformation process that goes along with that. So when you talk about these things, are you suggesting that deposits will be transformed and taken away from banks, whether it's through tokenization or other means, or are you saying that the banks will have to sort of do something more to make their deposits remain attractive and continue that kind of foundational, traditional way of building our financial system?
You know, for more than 2 years, and the book came out in October. Silicon Valley Bank was, just recently. Now, for more than 2 years, I was asking myself this question: if banking is going to be transformed, what about banking needs to be transformed most of all for that transformation to be real? So I looked at everything in finance, and right there, staring at me, was the most important product, as you've just indicated, in banking, that a banker cannot imagine a bank existing without, and that is the deposit account. And this is the same as Kodak having invented digital film in 1995. If they looked at their business and said, which of our products is going to be disintermediated, is sitting right there in front of them. It's the yellow box 35 physical film. And yet, Kodak did not give up the film, the physical film, right up to the point of going into bankruptcy in 2010, while Sony introduced, its Sony camera, digital camera, and then in 2000 and the iPhone came about in about 2007. So the transition was taking place, and it doesn't occur to the incumbents that it's the very core of the asset or the business line or the product that needs to be disintermediated. And what is it about the deposit business? In the old days, deposits was just good old-fashioned balance sheet that captured the amount of money that you're saving. And then over time, banks weren't paying any interest on it either. I mean, the money that you spend taking a cab to go to the ATM to withdraw your money wipes out whatever interest that you bear on it. So the utility of it was in total decline. And then the digital wallets came about, and it was the Alipay, the WeChat Pay, that had figured out that by creating a digital wallet, you create incredible utility of money. And these became deposit-taking companies. And today, of course, in the US right now, in fact, in June or so, they will be introducing FedNow, which is instant payment. And so you're going to start seeing a lot more activity on digital wallets. The platform players like Facebook and LinkedIn and all that, they had the opportunity to become digital wallets themselves. They missed the opportunity, and Twitter now becomes a digital wallet. Your iPhone,
Apple Pay, right, and Goldman now have more than 4% interest on. Basically, it's like Yuebao in China. It seems to me, you leave some money on your iPhone or you use that in a deposit, and you get rewarded.
And the digital wallet players themselves become a force to be reckoned with in the interbank lending market, because they have the incredible ability to garner deposits far more efficiently than the small banks, and the small financial institutions, which in turn borrows from the deposit from the digital wallets. Now, and then what the digital wallets do is that they increase the amount of utility on it. And what's the next phase? Where digital wallets are no longer a balance sheet number, but actual tokens. It's like real money that exists in a wallet. And that's what crypto is, right? And we're now entering a phase where we can, all of us can hoard our tokens in digital wallets and pay each other directly. So the trend is very clear. It's taking place. And so what I'm saying is that if the deposit business is going to be revolutionized, the purpose of deposits is not wealth generation. I mean, like, forget wealth generation in deposit business forever, because it's not ever coming back. It's utilization, and utilization for everyday life, but also increasingly in the digital ecosystems that we're going to be existing in, whether it's in the metaverse, in gaming, and all kinds of interactions in the digital sphere. And I can see that there will come a day when banking or banks will compete with each other to issue stable coins of their own. Every bank in the world issuing their own stable coins and competing on the utility of their stable coins, on the convertibility of the stable coins, and the immutability of the stable coins as it goes through different platforms. In other words, it's universal.
Right.
And banks are the most reliable issuers or purveyors of the stablecoin business, because what is stablecoin's biggest problem today? It's the governance structure, that the issuers of the stablecoins can warranty that they meet the governance commitments, like the back end balance sheet that supports the value of the currency and all that. And banks are in the best position to ensure that the governance structure is in place. So I can see that transition taking place. Okay, and remember I said this because very few people see what I see, and I want to put it out there, and I want to see the transitions as it takes place. Now, in the US right now, there's a lot of debate on how stable coins and cryptocurrencies should be governed and should be regulated. And in writing this book, I try to go back to underlining trends and keep my finger on it, so that despite the noise and despite all the distractions in terms of what the opinions of the different players are, I keep my eye on the immutable trend that is underway, and check to see that that's exactly where we are heading.
With I guess the first response that somebody in banking might have is, well, we're engaging with the various fintechs, we're doing our digital transformation processes. In the fintech world itself, I think 6 or 7 years ago it was all about disruption, but lately it's become all about working with banks, which is always super boring at a conference because you want the fireworks. But your book is pretty scathing, actually, on digital programs and fintech. You've got a quote here that applying too much technology to an incumbent system only reinforces the status quo. What is your analysis of the problem that, the fundamental problem that fintechs, particularly B2B fintechs, bring to this proposition and to this transition?
Fintechs start by thinking that they're going to be disrupting the system, and then they walk right into a regulated universe, and then they become compliant to the regulated universe, and then they start defining their products in the same way as the incumbents do. And that's why we started this conversation with the mortgage story, which is that if a fintech, which is not a bank, which has got a different source of funding and different types of relationships, calls its product mortgages, it's a matter of time before its own cost structure, before the regulatory overhang in terms of regulating the product, all of it starts to look like banking. And then it's natural that the fintech ends up saying, you know what, the only way to play this game is to become a bank ourselves. And also that's why there's a section in my book say we want to become banks too. And also what happened, that disruption that was already underway resulted in the challengers wanting to become like the very institution that they're trying to disrupt. And that's why I'm saying in my book, again, putting my finger on it and saying that if the product doesn't change, nothing changes. And so if we want to see real transformation taking place in finance, we need to start seeing transformation in products. And that's why I put my finger on the deposits business, saying that, isn't this the product that most defines finance? Watch how this product changes.
Right. So we're coming toward the end of our time, Emmanuel. This has been very interesting. I think we could probably bang on together for a very long time, but respect your time and that of our audience. What do you tell people, whether they're approaching you, whether they're from the fintech world or the TradFi or incumbent world? What's kind of the big takeaway that you want them to have?
I'm very aware that the book is a little bit high level, so on the face of it, the reader might say, well, all this is into the future, and what has it got to do with the business that I'm running right now? And I'll say this, because I can see where this is going. There are some important principles that I'm saying to the incumbents and the fintech players and the digital banks that exist today. Firstly, platforms, all players need to be on platforms, but no player is going to be profitable on platforms going forward, because platforms themselves are disintegrating. If the customer, the user is gaining incredible control over how he wants to interact, who he wants to interact with, he's not going to give you the value or the income from having provided this infrastructure. So platforms are inherently unprofitable. And I'm also saying to the incumbents, look at your products again and say, what is it about my product that has to change to keep up with the trend as it's evolving? So a fund manager, for example, thinks that, by selling ETFs and not sitting on the core asset, the underlying asset, makes him profitable. Everybody else can do the same thing. So the margins on the funds business has collapsed totally. There are times when incumbent players think that, we now have this technology, it reduces our costs, we don't need too much human intervention, and therefore it's a profit proposition. The nature of technology is such that it commoditizes everyone, and then you got to look for a value proposition from a different angle that sits outside the technology. So this is how we need to think about our everyday strategies. And so I wrote this book to help the incumbents think through the inevitability of where technology is taking us, and then just go back to first principles and try to figure out what is the essence of finance that they're trying to safeguard and to build on.
When you're dealing with those questions of everything becoming commoditized, traditionally what incumbents have done is they've either consolidated and just become super big and generate better unit economics, or they just become marketing machines with some sort of generic engine that does finance in the back. That's been tried and true. Do you think that will still be the way that incumbents will be able to survive and thrive, or is this transition now going to require something different?
Well, there's always a moment in time story. So what you just said is actually what happened in the high frequency trading sphere since 2014. Initially, it was a value differentiator, and the players in high frequency trading thought that they could charge more by being able to trade faster and so on. And then it became so commoditized, and that's exactly what happened. The ones with the biggest volume had to go out and try and buy the others in order to have dominant market share, and eventually that whole industry just collapsed, despite incredible technology being applied. And that story is going to be repeated many times. And yes, there will be mergers and acquisition. And so when I see mergers and acquisition in fintechs today, you attend the fintech festivals. It's an opportunity for subscale players to offer themselves to be bought by, the next, the greater fool, as I like to think. Now, all that is incremental activity. I think that if we have a very clear idea where technology is actually bringing us to, we can not be distracted by these incremental activities and say, what is it that I need to get to in order to create an enduring financial business or financial, strategy that I can build on over time. So that's the purpose of this book.
Great. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me on DigFin VOX, Emmanuel Daniel.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for having read the book, and your questions helped me to describe it very well. Thank you very much.
Great.